And on our panel today are Letha with TechServe, Joe with Unified Connections, Brian Brown, Melissa ISD, Brooks Moore, Alito ISD, and David Bitters with White Settlement. So the first thing that I'd like to do with this panel is ask them a question, ask you a question, and simply just answer by raising your hand. How many of you had network problems when iOS 7 came out that day? Yeah, I heard a lot of people did. It slowed their network down. Okay, I wish I had thought of that one for our survey. So what I'd like to do as a backdrop for our panel discussion is refer to some of the survey data that we collected in the last couple of weeks. And what we did is we reached out to about 2,000 ISD people, and we asked them a series of questions. And I'd like to refer to some of that here, and also to just give you an idea the type of survey data we want to collect on a quarterly basis. And I also want to reach out to you and invite you to let me know if there's any questions you'd like to add to the surveys, if there's any data, any trends that you would like to see that's happening across Texas ISDs. That's what we hope to achieve with the survey data. Okay, so before I ask the first question, this first chart says that what are the big issues in my ISD? And the top of the list is updating my PCs. And then the second question was, what percent of your PCs need to be updated because they're really slow? Well, about half the people said that at least 30% of their PCs were really slow. And then if you look up at the top 3 or 4 bars, about a quarter of the people said that over half of their PCs were really, really slow. But if we look at how many people are implementing virtual desktops, the number is a little less than 20%. So my first question, which I'll start with Brooks, is why the disparity?
Well, I think the first major hurdle to get over is change, and a lot of districts would love to keep up with a 5-year replacement cycle, but to be honest, for a lot of us, that's just not a reality. We've got to find out ways and figure out ways to do more with less. But change is a huge hurdle to get over, and depending on the size of your district and the amount of help you have on your staff, the amount of resources that you have at your disposal, all of those things have to be taken into account when kind of jumping on the VDI train, if you will. I mean, it is something that, if you know server virtualization, that doesn't mean that you know virtual desktop virtualization. It is a completely different animal altogether, of which you don't need to take that. I'm not suggesting you don't do VDI, because I'm doing it now, and if I can do it, I think anybody can do it. But it's something that as funding is decreasing and the need for technology is increasing, it's going to be a major player in delivering that rich content to our kids. So number one, I would say, the original question was why aren't people doing it? And I think the biggest thing is change. But if you're going to jump on the train, you've got to make sure you have sufficient help, use cases for people who've done this and been in the trenches, and learn from them first.
David, do you want to add anything to that?
Definitely on the school side, I say the investment with your board members, the superintendent, going through and making those long-range plans. Because in the past, I can tell you from our school district, we would do a lot of things with technology and hope it worked. And so now, over the last few years, as we put that plan in place and laying out the advantages and showing what technology can do, our board members have that investment, and it's one of their top goals. So.
I just wrote a case study on Titusville, Pennsylvania school district who just did a VDI implementation, and they said it paid off immediately. Mm-hmm. And part of it was because of their solid-state disk implementation versus it would have been much more expensive to use disk drives. But my point is, it seems like it would happen a lot faster if there's an immediate payoff. Is that not motivation enough?
I believe so, but it's tying the things in and the funding, the issues that go through, and allowing you to get that plan.
And you got to have the experience and the
Yeah, the
expertise,
experience.
otherwise.
And the investment.
Yeah.
So,
Letha, you want to add anything to that?
One of the things I think that we started approaching about virtual desktop once we did the Alito, which was the first time we really bit off a large initiative like that. Then we started working at White Settlement. At Alito, we had a big bond package, so we were able to just bring in the new devices that we wanted. But when we were at White Settlement, we came in with wanting to upgrade from XP to 7, wanting to get them onto Office 2010, and we didn't have the devices to do that with. And so we had to shuffle around, and we came up together with UCX as a partner of ours, where we said, okay, what can we do to make a difference? And so most of the districts we talked to, the reason they hadn't really jumped on the VDI bandwagon is for cost. And it was a cost, and it was also a skill set. Do I have the staff to do it, or am I going to have to pay someone else to do it? And then how do I maintain it after that? So there was both the dollars and then the skill sets for that. So we looked into another server solution that would help really make a difference, and so it would help school districts know that just because you can't purchase this one solution, there's a solution you can use to get you into the ballgame and to really help make a difference in the labs and the classrooms.
And for what it's worth, on the corporate side, one thing I've seen over and over again is VDI isn't server virtualization. And so on the corporate side, they're reaching out to people like HVE and Unified Connections to, they want to get it done fast. And if you don't have the in-house expertise, they're just reaching out to partners to help them, that's where the expertise is.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna move on to the next subject. Going the wrong way. So we asked people how their Wi-Fi coverage, or let me back up again. So, oops. If I go back to that first chart and look at it again, if we look at the red bar about the improving their Wi-Fi coverage was about 4th on their list, which meant it was somewhat important. About close to half the people thought it was important. But 80% of the people said that they had at least 80% coverage in of their classrooms. So my question is, and I'll start with Brian, is I guess 80% is not good enough? Is that why so many people still think it's a priority?
Well, I think what we see is that as we start to put out one-to-one computing, a coverage model is not going to work.
And define that for everybody.
Well, a coverage, just because you have wireless coverage in the area doesn't mean that you can handle the number of devices that are going to be there. Each access point is physically limited to how many devices can actually attach to it and still receive an adequate amount of bandwidth. So if you go into a cafeteria and you have 300 or 400 kids sitting in there and one access point, that access point's crying for help. And nobody's really getting very good quality of service. So you need to have not just coverage, but you need to have capacity. And that was something that our district really, we migrated from a coverage model. We had 100% coverage in all of our rooms. But even on the football field, we had coverage. But we have moved to a capacity model where we're able to handle having 30 or 40 devices in a pretty tight area. I wouldn't say every classroom could have 30 devices in it, but every other classroom at this point could have 30 devices in it. And we designed it so that we could go back and add the other half at any given time. So if we get a little, we start noticing that there's a capacity issue in this area, we can go in and install a single AP or a couple of APs in the room, in the places that was set up ahead of time when we designed it originally.
So David, what's the coverage look like in your district?
At our high school this year, we went one-to-one with 1,700 plus students, and we're at 100%. Going through and adjusting the access points, as he was talking about, our staff got to, it's been a learning opportunity for us in the first 2 weeks, and adjusting that and putting that into play, but it's been very successful. But the expectation for that coverage is 100%, because we've empowered our teachers and set that expectation that they will be using that technology.
So Brian, what's a cafeteria coverage look like now? What's a hardware standpoint? What do you got in the cafeteria?
I have two APs in there that are both rated to handle upwards of 100 devices apiece, just based on the back end, what's on the back end, number of processors they have in them, and the back end connectivity. So we can handle pretty well 200 people in there, but reality is not everybody's using the internet at the same time, so we can handle quite a bit more than that.
Brooks, how about in your district?
We're dealing more of a coverage scenario. You know, we haven't had any one-to-one initiatives, so we're on the coverage side of the house where wireless is available, but it's not our network isn't capable of doing similar to what Brian's doing, one-to-one, or what White Settlement's doing either.
Lisa, you want to add something?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention, because David mentioned that we probably, because of the one-to-one we're doing there, and we did want to handle the not just the coverage, but the capacity. So we've got it at a little over 400 right now. And the reason we know this is because one of the students last week, after they were so proud of getting their iPad, decided to let all of his other teammates know how to get Madden game going. And so the next day at lunch, whoops, the network kind of got a little slow. So we have good coverage and capacity now.
So are any of you proactive about this, or when things start to slow down, that's when you look at it?
No, we're proactive. We're monitoring 24/7 right now.
All right, I'm gonna move on to the next subject. So we asked our respondents if they're considering 4G LTE so that their staff, their students, their parents could be provided with free access to online learning. So at least the meaning that I intended was that you have, if you have one-to-one or BYOD, when you're on the school campus, you have access to Wi-Fi. But if there's some people don't have internet access at home, so you don't really have universal access. So with the concept would be if the school district, and maybe in conjunction with the community, put in a cellular network, now there's free cell access for anybody with a 4G device. 45% of the people said they don't understand the concept. So, Letha, why is that? Did I ask the wrong question?
No, I don't think you asked the wrong question. I think it's just not been sometimes we get the horse before the cart before the horse. I think you want the horse before the cart, right? No, I think what really has happened is that we've gotten so concentrated on getting the tools in the hands of the teacher, in the hands of the student, and we forget about the infrastructure. I know that, like was mentioned earlier this morning about E-rate, there's a dollar amount involved in getting this done. So not only do you need to have the cooperation between the city, the municipalities, and the school districts, but you've got to have the funds for it, because at this time, E-rate does not reimburse you for telecommunications if it's outside of the school district, if they're taking it home. So one of the things we're seeing, like through initiatives of lending programs from the service centers, other type of grants, we're seeing that we can use devices to supplement at school districts like we've done at some of the other ones. White Settlement, we use the Verizon MiFi just to test it out in a pilot program. I know that there's other districts like Plano and others that have used different types of scenarios, solutions, objectives to getting the community involved with the students and being able to take it home. I know we had students that were taking their iPads home thinking they had internet access, but not realizing they needed that Wi-Fi access. It's not just internet. You've got to have that device that allows you to have that Wi-Fi experience. So I think right now it's going to be, if it hasn't started at some of the real forward-thinking school districts, it is, because now what do you do to that student that you said, I want you to use this as now your way of learning and thinking, but you have to let it stop by the time you leave the campus because you are disadvantaged and you don't have it at home.
This wireless stuff's pretty magical to a lot of people. The difference between radio versus Wi-Fi versus cellular. It's not easy stuff. Brian, it's on your wish list. How did it get on your radar?
Actually, it was a conversation I had with Steve Baker of IP Convergence, and we were in a meeting, and we were actually talking about trying to get Steve to sponsor Droid U, which he did, and we were in there talking. He said, "Hey, this Huawei, they're going to have a LTE tablet And I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay. And he goes, but you would have your own LTE stuff and hook up to your network. And I went, wait a minute. This would be a way to provide universal access across our entire district. You know, we're a pretty small geographic district. We're only 31 square miles. So a lot in the terms of, you know, getting equipment out there to send the signal out is actually pretty easy for us. I actually already have an agreement with the city to use their water tower. So from a plan that we had about 8 years ago to do a WiMAX solution, this same type of idea. But, you know, the thing I think at this point for us is the cost, and we have to figure out, you know, is it important enough to us to you know, to allocate dollars to that? And I know that we're talking about it internally about trying to figure out a way to make this happen, because we can see the benefits to having these kids that don't have access at home have access all the time. And it's not just to the students, it's to benefit the entire family.
So Brooks, what is this on your radar screen at all?
I think it's on everybody's radar screen, but as great as it's, I mean, it is eventually going to have to be paid for somehow, right? And I mean, is it going to come out of fund balance? Is it going to come out of a bond? Is it, you know, where's it going to be paid from? And I think that's where groups like this are going to have to share ideas and get creative and figure out how in the world to get this done. Luckily, in this geographic area, you know, you can see about 100 miles, you know, it's flat. I mean, if you stand on a tuna can, you can see Lubbock almost. So we're lucky in that sense to where we're going to be able to hit, you know, a big square mileage surface area, if you will, with not much equipment. So I think it's going to be, I think we're in a really good spot geographically to see this happen.
It seems to me that we, the technology community, have some work to do in educating everybody, though, because the funding won't come if people don't understand it, and they don't understand, you know, they don't understand the benefits, they don't understand the technology. I think we got some work to do there. I'm going to move on to the next question. So in this, we asked people to estimate how many of their students will be provided with tablets in the years ahead. I was considering all the press that one-to-one initiatives get. I expected the number to be be higher, the absolute number to be higher, but obviously it's going to close to triple in the next couple of years. But my question is what other devices are there? If the number is 12%, obviously they're using other devices, or at least it seems obvious to me that there's other devices in play, because everybody has a media center. So I'm going to start with David. My question is, what other devices are they using, and what's the mix going to look like in your district in the future? And also one other question is, how are smartphones playing into the mix?
Definitely. Well, as I said, it's new to us this year, our iPad rollout, and that was the best solution for us at the time. We're looking at other tablets with that. We spent a lot of time with a committee developing the plan that we had, getting input from our teachers and our community and our teachers. And one of the things that we committed to when we moved through this plan, and we did choose the Apple product to roll out, is that in our 3-year plan that we would look at the other solutions out there to use that, because when our kids walk across the stage for graduation, we want them to have multiple opportunities looking at different tablets, different in the Apple environment versus the Microsoft environment, and them to have those experiences with each of them, not just solely be on one device. On the cell phones, I can tell you we did the bring your own device policy in our district the year before, getting ready for iPads or the technology we were going to use, and it worked good for us. It allowed our kids and our teachers to start getting ready for the new technology. But as we've rolled out the iPads for this year, we are not using the cell phones. We're looking at that. A lot of feedback we've got from our staff is now with the iPad and the cell phone becomes disruptive technology. And so they keep that out in a responsible use in the hallways, but not in the classroom.
And the reason why is, what's the criteria for that?
Because it became disrupted.
So you couldn't
And-
keep them focused on just this learning with the device.
Right. So we're getting to learn on the iPad, keeping them focused on that part and plugging that in.
So Brian, you're obviously got a lot of emphasis on Android technology. What other devices are in play? What's the mix? And Melissa?
Well, we use Windows-based netbooks, laptops, and then I don't want to come across as the anti-Apple person, because we actually do run iMacs in all of our journalism and art classrooms, and so that's we have that as well. So that's our media centers have desktops in them. We have not implemented any VDI yet, and it's kind of throwing back to the first question, but the reason why we haven't really done VDI is because I have 2 technical staff, and they know how to fix a desktop, but if I change the whole thing over to VDI and it breaks, they don't have the experience yet. And so we're going to have to start really small and something that's not mission critical and not 1,000 computers or 500 computers. We're going to have to start with like 30 to get them, one lab so that they learn. I have to have my technical staff have to know how to operate the equipment, and so they have to be ahead of everybody else. And so I think, that's, we have we're not device specific. We're very agnostic when it comes to what do we have out there. But as for a district, what we're going to purchase for our kids, we are going to be purchasing Android tablets.
Do you see any place for smartphones in?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of teachers that are using like Remind 101 with smartphones that actually you can push a push message to the phone to remind them of, you have homework due tomorrow or you have a test tomorrow, those types of things. So we have a lot of high school teachers utilizing that type of technologies with the students' smartphones. And we do have one pioneering teacher that has developed a bell ringer activity that uses text messaging. And I'm not sure exactly how she does it, but she has an alternative bell ringer for kids that don't have a smartphone, but she allows them to use their phone in the class for their bell ringer. And she teaches Spanish, so it has to do with vocabulary.
Joe, you talk to a lot of different school districts. What are you seeing out there?
Everything. We see
Where's it?
mixtures, any kind of device. It's amazing to see the different implementations across districts. We see districts that have leased some type of device to a student and given a device to a student, let them use their own devices, whatever they might be, and eventually, hopefully it turns into that it doesn't matter to us what the operating system is or what we're actually using, just that we can use something to get online and do what we need to do.
So Letha, all things considered, off the top of your head, what's the mix going to look like a couple of years from now?
If it was me, I would put everything out there that they'd let me put out there. I mean, I really think that the kids need to have as much exposure to as much as they can. Just enable them, enrich them. Let them know that the sky's the limit and show them all the different devices. I think you will get more females involved in science and in technology if you really start giving them the opportunity to touch it and feel it and encourage them that they can do whatever they want to do. And here's some tools that you'll be using.
Is it also because there's no one device that can do it all, too? You kind of need.
Isn't that capitalization? Right? I don't think we want a monopoly on it. I think we want to have everybody coming out and saying, you know what, I just came up with something that resolves this issue. Not everybody's looking to resolve the same issue, but at some point we come together with it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move to the next subject. Okay, this first question is going to be for Joe, and we asked our respondent base if they believe that sharing a private compute cloud with other ISDs was a good idea. And it looked to me like a lot of the Texas ISD people are actually from Missouri because they wanted to see it working somewhere else first. So my question for Joe is what are you seeing among the districts you're working with?
Well, again, we see a lot of different things. Most of the time, VDI implementations that we've come across as consultants are extremely expensive. Cost is a variable for implementation for them. And it's the majority, it's the number one reason. It's usually too expensive. And you have to start with a certain number of desktops that has a long-term commitment, like 1,000 is a typical number, like you had mentioned earlier, that you have to start with to have this cost breakdown. That's one of the reasons that we developed HV platform that exists right now, is so you can start with 50. You know, that's where we start. You start with 50 VDI desktops. And not just cost, but complexity. You don't want an extremely complex system that is going to be so hard to manage that you have to spend years training your support staff to be able to manage these systems. So that was two. That was the second thing that we addressed with what we've done. And third is user experience, and it's not necessarily in that order. It's just three things. The user experience has to be as good or better as if you had bought a new computer for them. And that's why you see a lot of people that say, I don't like this, or I don't believe in it. And I spend a lot of time in the show me state, and I believe, come on and I'll show you. I'll show you what makes the difference. Just like you were talking solid state drives, how we do that, how we implement it. We can show you how to do this, especially with Huawei's help, how they can help you to implement solutions that are cost effective. We're talking hardware wise. I don't know exact numbers anymore, but I believe we're below $200 per desktop. Depending on your economies of scale is always going to be a factor. But when you can get below $200 to implement a VDI, then it starts to make sense. Wait a minute, it's going to cost me for a new PC how much? And I'm probably stringing this question out a little bit. I don't mean to, but how much is it going to cost to get a new PC, especially in this transition period that we're in? We really are in a transition period where we're moving from a traditional PC into a more mobile platform. I mean, that's what everybody's talking about. Everybody's going to have a tablet or this or that. And what do we do for that time period?
So, but are people talking about pooling their resources and do? And so first of all, you're implying in your answer that once you virtualize resources, you can then provision them to different people, whether it's different clients in the same district or it's multiple districts. But you now have this, these virtual resources that you can push a button and assign it to somebody, right? Instead of putting in all this hardware. But I think that I'm an outsider to the ISDs, but I wonder why they're not, considering how cash strapped they all are. Why aren't they pooling the resources?
I heard somebody earlier say that there's a reason it's independent school district in Texas, and I think that's probably a better reason than any, is that it is. But we are learning how we can work together. It's hard for a school district, especially when, I don't know if y'all saw it a few weeks ago, that Google came out and said, don't expect any privacy. If you use Google Mail and you put something in it, don't expect us to not read it, because we're going to. They said that to the courts. And for an independent school district, that's a pretty big deal. We have to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? So it's difficult for us to say, well, we're going to put all of our data, including confidential student information, up on Amazon's cloud. And what's going to stop them from saying the same thing? What's going to stop Amazon from saying, we're going to read through all of your student records and all of your... With a school district that is able to do this for you as a school district, which is what DCS is an actual school district, they can make those kind of guarantees. So a shared environment that meets all those things, those criteria, it's cost effective, it's a good end user experience, then we have the ability to show that, which we can now, and say, here's a shared resource that's from a school district to another school district. We're not going to read your data. We don't want to. If we can, then something's wrong. Because most of the time, I don't want to know that information.
So one thing I've observed is, if people seem to have it seems to be an easier decision to, for instance, partner up with TechServe than it is to get into an arrangement with the sister ISD. That's like getting into opening a restaurant with your friend. That seems to be a little bit harder. What are you experiencing, Letha?
Well, I think from 15 years ago, when there were so many districts that looked at this crazy lady coming out of the private sector and going, what, you want to give me bandwidth? What? I have so many wonderful mentors in this room and in education to help me learn how to bring the world to the desktop with this vision. And the organization was very open and supportive from the superintendent board down to say, and working with TEA and working with the state and really trying to come up with a way to bring the school districts back together and work as a full community instead of so independently. Yes, we still have our districts that are rich in tradition and with our communities, and you don't want to take that away. So you try to be as flexible as you need to be, so that it's reaching where everybody's at. So you can make a difference in one district that's a 1A versus a district that's a 5A. You try to really cross those boundaries so there's no walls like you're trying to do in a classroom where you don't want any walls anymore. You want learning to be an experience that's without walls.
Brooks, you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like the idea of sharing, but at the same time, a lot of Texas schools have a lot of pride, and you might as well have a big wall around their community. But in partnering with folks like, TechServe and coming to groups just like this, it lowers those walls in some regard, and can only do us benefit. But I don't see that pride ever truly going away, especially in the smaller communities. So it's up to us to help try to get everybody together.
It seems to me that virtualization is the first phase that we have to go through. If you look at the corporate world, there was a lot of hostility towards VMware and their virtualization software because it rocked organizations, it changed jobs, it changed budgets. But today, the first thing that corporations do when they plan every year is they decide what works with their virtualization software. It's the core of their architecture. And it also has established almost every corporation now as a private cloud provider because all of the resources are all virtualized. And the way they support their clients inside their company is they provision these resources. And it seems like the ISD communities is going through that process right now. But the killer app for ISDs is desktop virtualization as opposed to server virtualization. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, we don't. I think that VDI is an area that a lot of school districts, if they haven't moved there already, will be in the next just couple of years. In the next year or two, as their desktop rotations, come into play, and they have the money to do that. If the VDI solution is cheaper, tech directors in general are really good for hey, I can get the same functionality or better functionality for less money. They go with it. So I could see VDI definitely. But server virtualization, that's. I really see that as a big thing for school districts as well, just because, you can reduce a total cost of ownership, and just operation costs. I mean, just the actual operations cost on having, one piece of equipment or maybe two pieces of equipment versus having, a rack, an entire rack that you're having to heat and cool or, cool that room, because of the heat being generated versus the heat being generated by far less equipment. So I think, both ends, there's a economic impact that school districts haven't really fully realized.
Okay, I'm going to try to get a couple more questions in here before we wrap this up. So ISD strategy for video conferencing. About half the people said they've already deployed video conferencing, and about 2/3 said that they've deployed fiber optic networks. And my question for Letha is, what trends do you see in the use of video, and how does that affect bandwidth for ISDs?
It's definitely a bandwidth hog. That's one of the things that a lot of districts, you talked earlier today, several of the speakers have talked earlier today about digital content, where we're going with digital content. Jane mentioned a lot about the digital content. We're going online. I mean, if you're moving everything out to be hosted, whether it's in your private network or whether it's within a private network that's outside of your own WAN, you're still, just like most of the student information systems on most districts, unless you're really large, you have it hosted. And so having those type of things done that way, you're trying to prioritize that bandwidth usage, and then you've got the classroom that you're encouraging. I want you to be, supplementing some of your curriculum with this digital content. I want you to be using NBC Learn. I want you to be using digital streaming, whatever the flavor is. I want you to use that in your classroom. So how do you try to come up with the best way to do that? And it's the bandwidth from 15 years ago is still number one out there today, is I got to have the bandwidth to do what you need me to do. Whether I'm doing one-to-one, whether I'm doing virtualization, I still need to have the bandwidth.
So let me ask you how it translates to your network architecture. For instance, it could be 100 megabit to the PC, 1 gigabit to the, from the edge to the core, and 10 gigabit backbone. Is that going to 40, 10, 1, or, what are you guys doing at TechServe?
We're looking to see how we can get 10 gig backbones everywhere.
Okay, so the next step is to get a 10 gig
Well,
backbone.
it's like a lot of districts. You think we've literally seen from 5 years ago when we usually go on a 5-year WAN refresh with the equipment and with bandwidth, and what we thought we were preparing for was to be able to give districts the ability to go up to a gig of bandwidth when they were pretty comfortable at 50, but then all of these initiatives started with digital content, with virtual schools, virtual classrooms, with being able to do a lot of the testing that's being required. There were so many things starting to come online with needing the bandwidth, and so which ones can you do first? Which ones are priorities to the school districts? And it varies. And so we saw within 5 years school districts going from 50 to 100 meg, and they're well over a gig. And these are school districts anywhere from 1,000 that's in their whole district to school districts over 60,000.
So 10 gigabit technology is not out of the question for a medium-sized school district?
Not at all.
For their data center?
No, sir, I don't believe so.
Okay. Any comments on that,
It's
Brooke?
really increased.
In terms of dark fiber versus leased lines, and I think all of us probably have our own opinions on which direction to go. Obviously, dark fiber is going to be a good solution for certain situations, but I always lean towards suggesting the leased line, just because if a big tractor comes and knocks out or comes through, or a backhoe, it happens in Aledo, believe it or not, comes and tears up your fiber, it's up to AT&T or whoever that service is to come in and get it fixed. And the good news is it's affordable for us to be able to do that also. So it makes the AT&Ts look pretty good in my opinion, which sometimes is hard to do.
And is bandwidth on your campus an issue, or when you're talking bandwidth, you're talking WAN? It seems to be the issue that you guys are most sensitive to.
These days, I mean, it's changing to where that's really not becoming the problem on the internal LAN. And what we're trying to do now, talking about this LTE technology, is how do we get this our network outside of our firewall? How do we get it to the hands of the kids while they're at home? Just like what Brian said earlier in his presentation, internet at home is only going to benefit not only the students and their academic achievement, but it's going to help the families out too. So that's sort of the next riddle that we're going to have to solve, and I like what I'm seeing so far.
And is there any apps that are, kind of rise above the rest in terms of being bandwidth hogs?
Joe, I'll let Joe answer that one.
Yeah,
Go
I think Joe can answer it, but with what we're experiencing, it's everything from an app that's a game, because the games are the big deal, especially if you're at the one at the school, unless you start shaping that traffic or literally access listing and saying you're not going to get through this at all. But there's certain things that we've got to start teaching our kids, just like we did, when I was growing up in the horse and carriage days. You were taught certain social etiquette. Well, we've got to teach them digital social etiquette too.
That's a great question, and in the future, there's not going to be one specific thing, because everything that we do now is going to be multimedia enriched. We're going to have video as part of our testing. Our state tests now have media enhanced, media rich, I think it's flash based, most of it now is in all the new one, content. So everything that we do is bandwidth intensive, external to our networks most of the time. We always have little ways that we can move some of that bandwidth back in with caching or proxy servers. But more and more, we are seeing an increase into all the apps, everything across the board, that they're trying to have more bandwidth or use more bandwidth to push down this content in real time, whether it's big data or media-rich applications. It's everything. It's amazing to see all the different things that we're doing that require so much more bandwidth.
So that makes sense. So it's a good segue to the next question, which is, okay, so now I understand you're accessing all these learning resources online, a lot of people at it consuming, especially WAN bandwidth. Now, explain to me why, are they also generating a lot of data? What's driving the need? So it looks like almost half the people are buying storage just this year, between now and the end of the year. So where's all the, what's creating all this new data? Brian, you want to answer that?
When I think of storage, I think of storage to run your VDI or server virtualization. That's, you have to have that, high demand storage available to even begin that process. I mean, you have to have the processors too, but a lot of us have servers that could serve as processors. They just don't have the hard drive space to handle, 50 desktops simultaneously. So, that's what, for me, when I see update storage, that's what I would be looking to do, is increase like SAN storage.
I mean, are kids doing things like, are they creating movies in school these days? Is that creating, because database entries don't need a lot of storage. It's got to be the rich media. I just don't know where it's coming from. You want to comment, Joe?
Can I say? Of course. We're seeing it across the board. Big data, what does that mean to you? What are you doing? We're storing more and more information, and a lot of that's internal to our sites, our different districts. Everybody talks about big data and what they're, for me, what that means is, we store a lot of information about, we provide desktops, or I can't think of the term right now, these dashboards to districts. We create them out of the data that's obtained from their different systems. And that takes up an enormous amount of room. You would not believe, even compressed, put into SQL, do whatever you want to do with it, storing the data that you can actually use takes up a tremendous amount of space. And you need fast access, because if you have a dashboard and you want to click on it and know that Johnny didn't, I heard a reference earlier, Johnny didn't take his particular test last night or do his homework, and you want to know those things in real time, then you have to have this, not only the space, but the high speed space that can retrieve that information for you. In addition to, a lot of districts still have a legacy platform of storing map drives, storing documents, doing a lot of things, and not pushing those out to the cloud. When we look at the amount of data that we're storing on, most of us call them H drives, but it's just some kind of CIF share that sits out on our network. When we look at what's actually on there, if we were to try to transfer that directly into the cloud and not have any transitional period, it would kill us. We would literally die because our external connections couldn't handle it. So we have to during this transition, we're going to have a lot of storage that is going to increase. It needs to get faster. It needs to be more robust to where we're not spending the amount of dollars that we had to on the past with 15K spinning hard drives, because those do cost a lot of money, and they heat up, which generates the need to cool and more money, and so on and so forth.
Okay, one last question. So our survey respondent said that this isn't a big surprise, that most of them said that huge obstacle for them implementing technologies was funding. But my question for David is, how much did the other three factors in there, the time to investigate, the expertise of, technical expertise and the board expertise, how much do they weigh into the funding issue?
Well, I would say definitely the time to investigate it and going through training our board, setting those expectations, showing them what those opportunities would be, as well as our principals. That was needed time to take, and those are steps you walk through. The biggest part, and you kind of touched on that in a few questions ago, was having the technical expert to come in. As a school district, 5 years ago, we were not set up to be experts. We were educators that were going through with a very small staff, kind of similar to what Brian talks about. I have this person can do this and this person. And at that time, we were moving very fast in our growth and having to use that. And so for us, as we moved and started working with TechServe, being able to bring in the experts to be able to tell us this is how it works, and I was able to stop asking the questions of why it doesn't work, how can we get this to work, to when I would work with them and they would say, well, do you want this to work this way, or what is your plan for that? And instantly that allowed us to start moving through and setting up our plans in place.
Okay, we're out of time now, so I want to thank everybody on our panel for participating, and thanks everybody for listening.